I have a subscription to Outside Magazine, and in the front of this magazine, there's a section called Exposure, which is a few pages of full-page photographs from an adventure photographer. And in one of the recent issues, there were photographs of these sailors on a sailboat in the ocean, what appeared to be a sailing race. And in the caption, it mentioned the photographer Jen Edney was embedded with these race teams for the duration of the race, which lasted 9 months. And I thought, what a great adventure. I need to get Jen on the show. So that's what this episode is about. Before we get to that, if you want to get in touch, you can send me an email at paul@thepursuitzone.com, or you can leave a voice message at speakpipe.com/thepursuitzone. So let's get into the show. Let me introduce Jen. The Volvo Ocean Race is an around-the-world sailing race over 9 months and 45,000 nautical miles. Within each race team is an embedded multimedia journalist whose job is to give the fans on shore a taste of what the race is really like. It's one of the toughest jobs in sports media, and Jen Edney was one of the 10 journalists embedded this year. Jen is a traveler and adventure storyteller using photography and video, and you can learn more about her at edneyap.com. Jen Edney, welcome to the Pursuit Zone.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Good.
Jen, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska.
And how did you get started in this adventure photojournalism?
That journey kind of started, I graduated with a degree in graphic design and visual journalism. I grew up on water, I grew up in lakes, and have loved the water my whole life, but I had a fear of the ocean, so I decided to do this Outward Bound course after I graduated to conquer that fear. So it was 30 days sailing around the Caribbean from Puerto Rico around, and then 2 weeks of sea kayaking the southern coast of Puerto Rico. And it also included surfing, wilderness first aid, and some climbing. And that really gave me the bug. And that trip is where I decided that I wanted to be a photojournalist. It was my first time outside of kind of really traveling out on my own outside of Nebraska. And it just opened my eyes to this whole other world and possibilities. So that was when I got the bug. And after that, I decided I went out to Jackson Hole for a photography workshop. And then decided I wanted to learn more about that career. And after that workshop, I moved out to Jackson Hole. I interned, did some work with Tom Engelson, and also worked at Teton Mountaineering while I was there. And while I was there, I got even more interested in adventure sports and decided also I wanted to further my knowledge in photojournalism. So I signed up for a few courses out at Brooks Institute in Ventura, California. And it was there that I decided I got an internship at the Ventura County Star. And that internship is really what changed things for me. I was given just a daily assignment to go photograph Zach Sunderland, who was a 16-year-old who was getting his boat ready to try to go for the record as the youngest person to solo circumnavigate around the world. And originally that was just a daily assignment. Then it became a school project, which eventually turned into my instructor saying, this story's too big. You need to go follow the story, and left. I already had a degree, so they said, you don't need school anymore. This is it. So went out to follow that story. And that story is what really, it took me around the world. But that's what really grew my interest in storytelling with sailing and the adventure side of things.
It looks like internships have been a big part of that. Or did you find those internships hard to get?
I'm trying to remember at the time. I think it was just good timing. I know for the paper it was good timing, and there's a spot open, and timing worked out for me. And then the rest of my education has mostly been through workshops, through the Adventure Summit photography workshop.
What's that experience like, going to one of those workshops?
Oh, it's incredible. Totally life-changing. I've done, I think my first one was a sports photography workshop in between my junior year and senior year of college. just the community, the teachers, the environment that they bring in for every workshop is just incredible. And the vibe. I remember the first workshop, I didn't even know how to use the DSLR camera. They said you can rent cameras. And so I came with a little Olympus. This is 10 years ago, never having used a DSLR, and just decided to throw myself into the deep end. And there were a few gracious students there that helped me along the way, and the instructors did as well. Then I decided that I learned so much that week that I ended up, basically I've done the adventure sports photography workshop, I think as a student once or twice, and the wildlife workshop. My dad is the reason why I got into photography, and so I was able to enter a contest to win an extra spot at the workshop, so I could bring him along and do that with him, which was a really special experience. And now I'm an instructor for the workshop, so it's kind of come full circle.
Neat.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, what kind of jobs do you do? I mean, let me throw an example out at you. Say here in Minnesota, there's some boat companies. Would something like a boat company contact you and say, hey, we got some new boats coming out. We need somebody to come out to the lake and help us shoot these ad campaigns? Or is that the type of work that you get, or all types?
That's part of it, but most of it for the last 10 years before the Volvo Ocean Race, it's been more working with teams or for teams or events, boat like sailing regattas, or for a particular team. I've done a lot of work with the U.S. sailing team over the past few years, and the Volvo Ocean Race has been a gold mine for over 6 years. And so a lot of my movements and choices and education and furthering my skill sets have been to prepare myself for that job, to train basically for it. So.
And you base yourself in Nebraska, right?
Well, that's a funny question. My mail has been going to Nebraska. My family all lives there, but I haven't technically had a base because I move around so much and I'm not anywhere for more than a month to 3 months at a time. I haven't technically had a base, I think, since I lived in Jackson Hole. So at least for the last 5 years, the momentum and the pace has just been crazy.
Do you enjoy that?
I have. It's been great. It's been that pace for probably a good 10 years. So it's, I always knew the race, when I did get the job for the race, I knew that would hopefully be my transition into being able to create a slower pace, be around my family more, be around my friends and family more, because that's the hardest part of what I do. That's the biggest sacrifice is time away from family. I'm a very big family person, and got nieces and nephews and cousins and brothers, parents, everybody. That's the hardest part, is being away so much.
So if we were to say that's the downside of the job, what's your favorite part of the job? I absolutely love being a part of telling people stories. I think it's absolutely incredible, the relationships that I've built over the last few years. It's by far the most important and my favorite part of the job, is the trust that happens between you and whoever you're working with, and that they allow you to tell their story. That's definitely been the best part of the job. So the Volvo Ocean Race, what is it for a person that maybe has never heard of it before? What about that race do we need to know?
Well, it's a 9-month around the world sailing race. So I think it's considered the longest sporting event in sports, but that's quite a long time for one race.
In order to get one of these positions, you need to apply for it. And what's that process like?
Well, for this, they've just, they sent out a application link, and basically what we do, our job every day on the boat, is to tell the story of the day. So we submit on average, 2.5 minutes of video telling the story of the day. Sorry, my brother's getting in the car. The application process consists of everyone who applies submitting a 2.5 minute video and about 5 images and a written story about whatever topic. And this topic for this application was about yourself, just to kind of mimic what kind of a production task you'd be sending off the boat every day. Yeah, so on the boats, our job was to basically send off 2 to 2.5 minutes of video, sometimes more, sometimes less. It really just depended on what happened during the day. We're not out there with a script, we're out there to report on what's happening. So we do that and send in that in, 5 to 10 images per day and occasionally a written blog. Well, also, besides doing that, those daily tasks, we're not allowed to help sail the boat, and we're not allowed to move things around the boat that would shift weight or anything like that. But we are allowed to help boil water for food and hot drinks, and help bail water and kind of help with some of the cleaning chores, whatever we could when we had some time.
Once you get accepted, they put you through a boot camp. What was that experience like?
Well, I don't know if boot camp's necessarily the right word, but basically just training to understand the systems on board. It's quite technical. We're in Marset, it's created this amazing opportunity for us to be able to send back footage from the middle of the ocean. It's pretty incredible. So it's just understanding the systems and all the technical part going into that. We had this we were at the headquarters in Alicante, Spain. They tried to introduce us to every department and so we had an understanding of what everyone's role is and how we all connect and who's on the other side of things when we're out there, pretty much. And it also consisted of some drone training and certifications to make sure that we were all up to speed, because that was going to be one of the groundbreaking things for us for the race, because it had never been done fully for a race like that.
You're using the drones during the race?
Yeah.
Well, what happens if something goes wrong and the drone gets lost?
Then you're out of a drone for, it's worth the risk because of the footage. The guys, my crew, they did a phenomenal job capturing footage in some of the harshest conditions in the world. And, just willing to take that risk to get the footage definitely paid off.
What kind of drone were you using?
DJI Phantom Pro 4 and Mavics.
So, Jen, do you embed with the same team, or when you get to port, do you switch out and get on a different team?
This edition of the race, we switched teams. We didn't rotate every team. We just had some teams that we would switch between.
And how do they decide what team you get on? Is it based on any type of personality things, or is it's just like chance?
We did a bunch of sailing and trialing before the race began. There was a whole pre-race session, and after the application process, they cut it down. Then we all had to do sea trials, and that was an opportunity for the teams and us to kind of work with each other to kind of get an idea of, it's a personality fit, it's, all sorts of factors. And then it was our bosses and the teams that decided kind of who went where.
So when you're out doing the sea trial, are you just doing kind of what you would normally do on the boat, taking video and photos and that while the crew is sailing?
Yeah, just basically the same thing. They just need to see that you have your sea legs, you can work around the boat, you're not going to be a liability on the boat, you're fit enough to do the job, you get along well with the team, all those things. And that, you may have the skill sets, but they need to see that you can use those in that type of environment. Because we had one guy, I think all of the onboard reporters had sailing experience or experience on boats, except for one, but he did fine in his sea trials. So they just need to know that you're capable to do the job on the boat.
Are there any females at all on the race crews, or are they all men?
Yeah, so this edition of the race, there was a rule put in place to ensure that women were included in the race. And so each team had, if they only took men, they could only have 7 crew. So most teams had 9. So 2 women, and the one team with the female skipper had 5 women and 5 men.
So when you're working on the boats, do you try to keep a professional distance from the crew? And I don't know if that would help you do your job better, or do you kind of develop a close bond with the crew?
It's a unique job in that sense, because you're living day in and day out on 60 feet of space with the crew. And in order for you to be able to do your job and get them to open up to you, you have to, I think, just, really be able to read the situation, know where you should and should not be, know when to push, when not to push. But certainly a relationship is necessary to be able to live on board with them and also be able to tell their story.
So let's talk a little bit about the boats themselves. I don't know if you can explain a little bit about kind of their size, or perhaps, what are the kind of the living conditions like inside the boat?
60-foot boat, it's carbon fiber, bare minimum. It's basically cots on the inside to sleep on, and there's no refrigerator or any kind of food system. So it's just two burners. We make our own water on board. Basically, stripped out racing boat, bare minimum.
So, what kind of food are you eating?
So it's basically whatever you can make with hot water, noodles, things like that, and bars and shakes, chocolate.
How many people are kind of live, or how does it work in terms of like shifts of how the crew works? Is everybody like on deck at the same time, or is there part of the people down sleeping while others are up on deck?
Yeah, so they have a watch system, and so it would always be 4 people on, 4 people off. So they sleep 4 hours at a time, or usually less, because within that time off, it's the time they get to eat or do anything else they need to do, check emails, check in. When it's cold and really cold conditions, like in the Southern Ocean, it takes a lot of time to get ready. About 20 to 30 minutes it can take to get completely dressed to go out there. Same when you come back in. So any chance I could get to start the kettle before they came down or help out at some point, you try to help when you could, because that already takes away 40 minutes of sleep for them. So, but 4 hours on, 4 hours off. So the boat's always moving and there's always people sailing.
So is the gear that you use, cameras and so on, is that provided for you, or do you get a chance to bring your own equipment?
Yeah, the gear was provided for us. So we all had the same kits. And go ahead.
I was going to ask if you could describe a little bit about your kit. We talked about the drones already. What kind of cameras, video cameras, anything else that you're using?
Yeah, so we each had a Canon and a Canon DSLR camera and a Sony. We had audio equipment, water housing, Garmin POV cameras, a Garmin 360 camera. And on board, the boat's equipped with 7 cameras in various locations that we can control from the media deck, which are really handy when conditions are extremely rough and it's too dangerous to go outside, or if you want to capture a different angle. There's in the back on the stern camera, it's always running, just not recording. So if something happens, that someone falls off the helm, or if something happens you want to capture and you weren't on deck, you can push the crash button and it'll record 4 minutes before and after whatever happened. So that's allows us to capture things we may not be out there for.
Where's all this footage? Where's it feeding into and getting stored? And how are you then able to like turn it or gather it up and turn it into some sort of a video?
Well, it gets stored on the system on board, and then you just pull the file off and add it to your daily boat feed that you would send off the boat.
What are you using for software to do this?
So for video, we use Adobe Premiere, and for photos, we use Photo Mechanic and Lightroom.
And did you call it the media console?
Yeah, the media desk.
Yeah, what's that like? Is that where you do most of your work?
Yeah, so it's in the stern of the boat, and it's where all the media magic happens. You definitely move around a lot. It's right next to the navigator station, so you can become pretty good friends with the navigator.
What do you have? Do you have like a little table with kind of describe it for me?
Yeah, it's a built-in desk and a chair that you move, because every time the boat tacks or jives, you need to move also your chair over to the other side, and you're always on the high side, windward side of the boat. So you have to move it. So it's identical on both sides of the desk. You just move the chair around, you unclip it and move the chair around, which can be quite difficult sometimes when it's really rough, or when it's rough.
So is there a typical day for you on board, Jen? Or are you able to develop any kind of routine, or is it every day is totally different?
I try to myself as much as I can. It's always there's going to be something thrown at you, but what I would try to do is also put myself on a watch system to keep myself in a routine and to keep up to date, to check in with the navigator to see what's going on. But typically would try to only sleep 4 to 5 hours at a time, and then it just really depended where we were at in the world and what time of day was light out and how I would structure my day. But you would go out and shoot for it, kind of figure out what story is for the day, then try to catch the sailors, in between their schedules to interview them and get what you needed for the day, and usually we would send in our content kind of as we were collecting it, or depending on the time zone we were at, we would have a specific time of day we would try to get everything in.
When you're putting your stuff out on a day-to-day basis, are you getting any feedback from like a producer that's telling you, no, this is good, more of this, or, not as much of this, or any feedback like that?
Well, it's really important that it's raw and it's real and reporting. And so there's no one really saying like, try to capture this or try to do this necessarily, unless they see something from their end, or if you're having technical difficulties or things like that. But in that regards, they're pretty hands off. But if they see like, there might be a problem or something is going well, sometimes they'll let you know. But we're always in contact with our watch producer, with someone at headquarters. So they're constantly able to give us feedback if they need to. But it's not scripted or anything like that.
When you're doing your job day to day, what's kind of the most and being on a boat and you're sailing through these oceans, what's kind of what's the most challenging part of the job for you?
Everything's wet all the time. So as you can imagine with equipment, that's probably the hardest part, is kind of, managing all that, keeping that dry, but also you really need to have a grip on the boat all the time. So carrying around your gear, trying to be safe, especially in really tough conditions, you have to think about it. Maybe the best way I can describe it is think of it like a sloth, how slow they move. You have to really be more focused on moving around the boat and not rush so that you don't injure yourself, because it takes 10 times longer to do every task when the conditions are rough, to go to the bathroom, to get your clothes on, to get your gear ready to go. So you just have to kind of plan for that.
When you're up on deck, are you hooked into a safety line?
Yeah, we have life jackets and harnesses and a double tether, so you're always connected to a part of the boat. What
was the toughest weather that you went through?
Oh, definitely the Southern Ocean leg from Cape Town to Melbourne. I was on Matt Frey, the leading boat, and there was a time period where we did over 30 jibes, and that was super exhausting for the crew, and definitely the toughest few days for myself, because when they jibe, the whole crew has to be on deck to do the maneuver. So you can imagine when you're doing 30 in about 48 hours, there's little to no sleep and everybody's just exhausted. And every time they do that, you're either moving your media desk or you're moving some stuff or you're filming. So that was by far the hardest couple of days.
Like, what size of waves are you seeing out there?
I'm not sure the biggest. I think someone has asked that before, but I'd have to actually look up numbers. I don't want to over dramatize it or anything, but
big enough.
Big enough, yeah. Big enough to knock me head first into the bulkhead.
Did it knock you out?
I didn't get knocked out. It was one of those days in the Southern Ocean. I was helping a couple crew members, sitting down in the galley with a few of the crew members transferring food, and my hands happened to be up, not holding on for 1 second. I was holding a bag up for one of the other crew to help me with, and right as that happened, we went bow down into a wave, and I went head first into the bulkhead.
Ouch!
And it happened so fast that they didn't realize how hard I had hit. But I definitely felt it.
It didn't break the skin, or you didn't have to get stitches?
It was too rough to stitch. I had a laceration on my forehead, and it was too rough to stitch. So Sophie, the amazing doctor on board, she glued my head together, and they weren't sure. We were 3 days out from the finish, but it looked like my face could have been fractured, but I was lucky it wasn't. Just badly bruised.
Did you get black eyes?
So, yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, I looked pretty. I looked like I had just come from a fight club with the Southern Ocean.
Did you take some selfies and then push those out to the world?
Well, I had to photograph myself for the doctor and filmed the whole thing, because as an onboard reporter, that's what we do. But it was kind of funny at the time because my POV cameras, of course, were dead. So I had used my phone, but took pictures and sent them to the doctor and videoed the whole thing. So
how do you get the footage out there? You're in the middle of the ocean. How does it work? Was it with satellites or what happens?
Yeah, Inmarsat was our satellite sponsor. And so we've got 2 smaller satellites and 1 big one that we would use or 1 stronger one that we would use for live calls. Typically like once a week or every few days, just depending on how your team was doing in the race, we would do live calls back to the office and to the rest of the world. So the technology, just incredible if you think that you're sending stuff directly off, in the Southern Ocean and other parts of the world.
When you get into port, how long are your typical port stays, and what's your favorite part about getting into port?
They would vary from, 10 days to 2 weeks to 5 days, just depending on where we were at in the race and what leg we were approaching, what work needed to be done on the boats, things like that. Each stopover, each place we were at had a race village set up. Then it would have activities, and there was import racing in every stopover. And I think my favorite part about it usually was fresh food. When you first arrived, it was fresh food and a shower.
Is there a place to wash clothes? Do you do that?
Oh no, there's no place to wash clothes. You bring the minimal amount that you can handle, but there's no washing of clothes on board.
No, not on board, but I mean at port.
Oh yeah, when you get into port, usually the teams would have a system set up to collect all of the laundry from the sailors. Usually that's how they would do it, I think, and or wherever you were staying in the hotel. So it was easy enough to get laundry done. It was completely necessary. I feel bad for some of the people having to open those bags.
Did you get a chance to explore any of the cities?
I did in Cape Town. I got a few days off. My family was there, so I got to explore quite a bit there and catch up with some friends, which was awesome. It's one of my favorite spots. I had been there prior 10 years before that, so it was great to catch up with friends there. Most places you could do some exploring. I didn't have much time off, but you could still do some exploring and still get a feel for the culture, which was pretty much the best part of being able to go around the world, was the people and the culture.
Besides Cape Town, are there any other port cities that stood out?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, New Zealand was a pretty cool stopover just because my family was there, and it's always nice to see family when you're doing a trip like that.
What city in New Zealand?
We were in Auckland.
So you mentioned some of the challenging parts of being in the race so far. What are your favorite parts of being in the race?
By far was getting, I guess, the ability and the honor of being embedded with some of the best athletes, sailors in the world, and to be able to develop relationships with them, be able to tell their story, to show their amazing resilience, passion for what they do. It's pretty incredible to have a front seat to that and have the opportunity to bring that to the rest of the world. Also, just the relationships built. We basically were a traveling family around the world for 9 months. So seeing familiar faces everywhere you go and creating those bonds and relationships. They say life at the extreme in the race, and they're not only talking about offshore. It's the whole pace of the race and everything is at the extreme. You experience every emotion to the extreme. I know I did, but the best part for sure was the relationships that I built along the way that will last a lifetime.
Has being in this race opened any doors for you that maybe you didn't expect?
Absolutely. I was joking with my mom the other day that it's been a year of learning life lessons, and every single day when we weren't sailing, when we weren't on board because we rotated, we were working with the multimedia team, so we were kind of helping them with whatever spot needed to be filled. So live cameras, helping, with every other aspect of the race. There's so many aspects of the race that pull it all together that need to be documented, like the educational program, the sustainability program. I got to help produce stories in all those areas and was pushed out of my comfort zone every single day, which was challenging. But in the end, I've had a month I had to compartmentalize a lot during the race. So this month has kind of been going through that filing cabinet and processing it all and taking a look back and thinking, wow, like I learned so much more than I ever thought I would. Basically, the race, to sum it up, it's nothing that I expected, but way more beautiful than I could have imagined. I was most primarily a photographer with video skills before the race, and now I'm basically, my next project I'm working on is producing a film and photo project. So I'm not sure I would have thought about that or had the confidence to do that before the race. It's just given me growing my skill sets to the point where I can pursue projects like that and feel comfortable doing that.
Is photography still kind of your passion, or are you thinking maybe more you want to get more into video?
Oh, I still love photography, and I can't wait to focus on some projects that I put on the back burner before I left. It's still my number one passion, but I'm definitely excited about the possibilities of where video can take me as well.
So are you able to tell us anything about this film you're producing?
Basically, all I can say right now is, I kept getting asked about if there was anybody telling my story, and it seemed like a weird question. I'm a storyteller. I don't, why would I be telling my story? And was asked that so much that I was, sitting with my watch producer in Alicante, and she and I were talking and decided that, we just came up with a way that we would like to do it, but also include other people in the film. So I can't say too much about it right now, but it's exciting and a little terrifying just because there's so many unknowns in that area, but I'm super excited just to have full creative control over a project. I've never had that in my life, and it's an exciting opportunity. And this project's already opened up a lot of doors and built relationships I never thought I would have. So I'm looking forward to where it's going to go.
Well, I found you through Outside Magazine. How did your photographs end up being in Outside Magazine? Is that something where they go through an agent, or do they call you directly?
They reached out to me directly and just mentioned they would like to include me in their exposure section.
Yeah, I love that section. There's some cool stuff in there.
Yeah, I was pretty excited when they reached out to me, because I really like that magazine, and I've definitely been inspired by the exposure section. So it was a bit surreal to be asked to be in it, to be on the other side.
Are you able to do the Volvo Ocean Race again? Yeah, that's part one of the question. And part two is, would you want to?
That's probably the most common question I've been asked since I got done with the race, and I would definitely do it again. More or less, it would just be where I'm at in life, and I'm 35 years old, and I want to have a family and make time for that part of my life. My pace hasn't been that generous to that part of my life. So the goal after the race was always to transition into a way to projects that would allow me to do that. So yeah, I'm able to apply again. I'm able to do the race again. I don't know in what capacity. I would certainly love to be an OBR again, an onboard reporter. It would just have to depend on where I'm at in life at the time.
So yeah, you already answered my next question, which was what's the most common question you get asked? But let me flip the question around: is what question do you wish people would ask you that they never do?
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, I think you've kind of answered it. Like I've learned a lot, and it's taken me some time to process that. But I think that question of what did you learn is a good one.
Well, you already mentioned you've got a video project coming up. Any other cool things? Any of these photo projects on the back burner that are going to be coming off the back burner anytime soon?
Yeah, well, it's funny because They're sort of being incorporated now into this film project. I'm in the process of building some relationships that could help with that, and it could help, I guess, pave the way for what's next. But I can't really say much right now, but in regards to that. But I think what I'm looking for besides this project, I think is going to be a pretty time-consuming one, but just I'm still really interested in storytelling and trying to figure out how to incorporate that with projects that I do moving forward, whether it's with commercial clients or with any teams. If I do continue working with teams, I'm still interested in the storytelling and multimedia part. So I will be including multimedia more in my projects in the future, and not just photography, but photography will still be the front and center.
Jen, how can people contact you if they want to learn more?
They can message me on Instagram or Facebook, or email me directly, jenedney@gmail.com.
And your website is edneyap.com. That's edneyap.com. And then all your social media contacts are also on there?
Yeah. I'm going through kind of a transition phase right now, because basically it's been a 9-year journey and a 6-year dream to do the Volvo Ocean Race. And now that's over. So it's the reason why I can't fully directly answer your questions as far as exactly what I'm doing next is because I'm still in that transition phase to figure out what I'm going to do, and look out for some branding changes and a few things are in the works there. So just basically a makeover.
Sure.
So
those things happen from time to time. You got to move on and do something else, and things change.
Yeah.
All right, Jen Edney, thank you so much for coming on the show and taking the time to tell us about your experience on the Volvo Ocean Race. Wow, it's really super interesting for me. I'd hardly know anything about sailing, and so thank you very much, and good luck on all your future projects.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for listening. If you want to support the show, here are a few simple ways. You can subscribe to the show on Spotify or YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast. You can like the show on Facebook or follow along on Twitter at The Pursuit Zone. This episode was recorded on August 31st, 2018. For the show notes and more great adventure travel podcasts, visit thepursuitzone.com.